Knowledge is the light which liberates the mind from darkness, and in the darkness of the night, the world looks to the moon for solace. This video is talking about a hot off the presses idea that came out of my 1067 live reaction, and so if you don't want to be spoiled, wait until you read the chapter to watch this video. That being said, yes, we will be talking about moons, and those of you who have read the chapter are probably like, wait, why is he talking about a moon after this chapter? Well, definitely tune into the live reactions because we always have the Vegapunk brain hat on there. With that in mind, pun intended, I really like this Mark Twain quote here. Everyone is a moon. We all have a dark side that we hide from sight. And to build upon that, we always share our brightest sides to those around us, similar to how the moon always shows us the same bright face. But if all our minds were connected, then there's no hiding from each other. Would that be a good thing or a bad thing? All I can say right now is that this kind of technology is not something humanity is ready for, even in our world, despite us getting close to this ourselves. But let me just tell you, this chapter set my brain on fire with all the connection points, and I think I landed on the moon with this idea. So let me take you to the moon with me, as I explain the idea sparked by Vegapunk. If you're new to my channel, the way I view the world is by making connections. So let me connect you to my vision, the ParVision. So let's get some of the soft things about 1067 out of the way. Rapid firing these thoughts. Number 1, this chapter makes my mind rope theory way more canon, with Vegapunk discussing the whole world connecting through their thoughts via Vegapunk records. Number 2, the Brain No Me supports the idea of how Devil Fruit powers can be formed through sheer willpower, which I talk about in this Devil Fruits are training wheels for peak hockey video, and the reason I'm saying this is it's confirmed that Vegapunk's brain is grown through the Devil Fruit's power, but we know a character that did this without a Devil Fruit, and that is Fukurokuju. If you think about how the no Mi for the fruits names could be a pun on Devil Fruit names, like the Gomu Gomu no Mi means the Gum Gum Fruit, but no Mi can make it the Gum Gum Brain, meaning all Devil Fruits are essentially brains, which is why they already kind of look like brains in the first place. But we'll talk about that later. Moving on to number 3. Momo's fruit was a failure cause it's pink. That's hilarious, and I love to see that this viral thought ended up being true. Now number 4, the timeline of this robot is dope. Between Fishman Island, St. Brice, and slavery being reintroduced 200 years ago, it'll be crazy to know where this legendary Iron Giant fits in. And number 5, there's so many more things that I want to talk about with this chapter, and so if you want to hear a little bit about that, check out the VOD for the live reaction or the conversation I had with Sai. And finally, we get to number 6 for 6 Vegapunks. Let's talk about the genius name of Punk Records. So Punk Records to a lot of us originally felt like a pun using Daft Punk, the musical group. Spoiler alert, they make music and have plenty of records under their name, which all of this could still be a masterful connection Oda is trying to tie us to. But in this chapter, we get the context of Punk Records told to us. Punk Records is the record of Vegapunk's ever-growing brain. So due to the no mi, or the brain fruit, his brain memorizes an unlimited amount of knowledge. And now I want to clarify something. Vegapunk is no less of a genius with this because just because you have all the information doesn't automatically make you a genius. That's the conundrum of our world also. We have our own sea of information called the internet in the palm of our hands, and we're still so dumb. On top of that, being as inventive as Vegapunk is with this information at hand is insane still. And so in a way, Vegapunk created his own server system within Punk Records that all of his satellites or clones can access to. Every single one of them are experts in their own fields, and they each connect to Punk Records once a day to synchronize all the memories that they acquired separately. They would be able to get much more done and be much more effective at what each one desires to pursue, while still sharing the experiences with the Unimind. When you see how Vegapunk demonstrates what a worldwide connection looks like, that is essentially mind rope, people connecting to a brain and sharing their experiences without speaking. It's like what a lot of us thought about Vegapunk having his brain in a separated room of sorts, but on a way crazier level. So let's talk about this idea, because this is the idea train that my brain took when confronted with these panels from chapter 1067. We don't know how the Vegapunks connect to the brain, but it more or less feels like it'd be how the voice of all things could function, where the brain imparts with you an insane amount of info, which I've spoken about this in the context of Laugh-Tale and Poneglyphs. It will be interesting to explore that line of thinking later on. But more than that, something interesting that we learned is again that Vegapunk has the brain fruit, or the Nomi Nomi no Mi. It was described to allow the user to memorize an unlimited amount of information, which is odd that it's just not called the Memo Memo no Mi, which obviously was taken by Pudding. And so a lot of people are connecting the two fruits, but I like to think of it like that they're on the same branch of power and that their fruits stem from the same source. But what's interesting is that while the brain fruit allows you to memorize anything, it does not allow you to manipulate memories. But Vegapunk, being the crazy person that he is, he figured out how to do that on his own. Through Punk records, he can store and impart on others his memories, but he didn't explain any way to manipulate the memories, and that's the dangerous part of this system. Technically, Pudding can walk up to Punk records and delete memories, and that would affect the entire system. So if the Vegapunks resynchronized because of Pudding's interaction here, all the satellites would have to disconnect to avoid being corrupted. I mean, this is generally the issue when it comes to centralizing a system, and especially nowadays, people like the idea of a decentralized system for this exact reason. But back to the point, technically Pudding, or maybe even Vegapunk himself, can actually manipulate the memories of the Punk records to then reflect on all people who are synchronized to the record system. Like for example, if either of them wanted to erase 100 years of history from the records, then all the people synced to it would forget. That sounds like it would effectively erase 100 years of history and completely void it from the memories. Oh wait, does that sound familiar? The Void Century? See, that's the interesting part. Every time I think of Vegapunk now, whenever he talks about a future plan, I'm almost hardwired to think something to that extent, but to a larger degree, happened in the past. And you realize if you take the technology and use it exactly how he wanted to, then you have your simple steps to recreating a Void Century. Which makes sense because in our world, and in One Piece, it seems that the future is the past and the past is the future. And the disconnect is the memories that come in between. So if we did what Vegapunk said and had the entire world connect to a single brain, all of humanity would have access to the knowledge and create a sea of information, which again sounds great, but with all great things there are its shortcomings as well. So let's say this is what happened in the past. The entire world connected to this record system, and then something happened in the Void Century that required a 100-year history delete. That is probably the simplest answer as to how it could have happened, but also explain how the past was so advanced, because if they all connected, then like Vegapunk said, they would have easily surpassed whatever he was capable of alone. And we know the Void Century residents surpassed Vegapunk, as in this chapter, he admits that even though he has all this knowledge and technology in front of him, he could not reverse engineer the legendary Iron Giant. And just like that, I was thinking, what else existed beyond Vegapunk's capability? Some things are gatekept by money restrictions, but then there's the food machine that isn't available worldwide, or the aircon, even the Vega Force in comparison to the Iron Giant. And so similarly, I think there was a Void Century version of Punk Records that actually did what Vegapunk envisioned for the future now. It could even be that the record that contains all the memories is called the One Piece. Which is crazy, but here is where the idea starts to get really exciting. So again, a tangent thing was that devil fruits are brains, possibly from the past users. But for this One Piece record to exist, that would seemingly require a previous user of the brain fruit or the progenitor of the fruit, which regardless would make sense that like Nika and all the other fruits, there was probably a Void Century parallel, and including that would be Vegapunk's parallel, who made all of these inventions that surpass Vegapunk himself. So then the next question is, okay, well, if Vegapunk stored his brain in the top of Egghead or somewhere in this egg, and it continues to grow as they memorize more, then what about the Void Century brain? The first thought was that maybe it was the tree of knowledge, which is why it has the crazy shape that it has. And maybe that's where this fruit originated in the first place. But then my brain exploded at the next thought, which would be the red line. Maybe the red line was formed to protect the brain and it wraps around the world, so everyone would be able to contribute to it and resynchronize with it. It's why the Holy Land is where it is. Maybe that also explains why the Iron Giant went to the Holy Land. It would explain the insane size of the red line, but also the size would have to be massive if the whole world was contributing to this brain. And all of this sounded great, but you can probably already tell that this is not where the train stops. See, the thing is, the red line isn't as accessible as we think. There has to be something that's more universal, and maybe even something that everyone can see at least once a day. And where did I say I was taking this train? The moon. Yes, okay, I promise, stay with me, but what if the original Ancient Kingdom records was the moon, meaning the moon is a giant brain that was used to connect the entire world? So the idea being that the moon crosses the entire world in a single day, and everyone on the planet would be able to see it at least once a day. And so this next part is why I started to love this idea in particular. If you think about it like this, then the moon appears at nighttime. So it'd be nighttime when people would synchronize. So people would share their brain when they sleep, or during their dreams. While people dream, they become one or more connected. But that's not even why I like this. It's because there is a particular character who has an unexplained but highlighted characteristic of not sleeping, and that's Blackbeard. And we still don't know why this is the case or why he has this quirk. Is it hereditary, for example? What if Blackbeard comes from a line of people that never slept? And why is that important? Well, if we are saying that in order to synchronize to the giant brain in the moon, you'd have to go to sleep. So in order for the Void Sentry to work, everyone needed to sleep at least once during that time for the memory wipe to happen. But if you had someone that never sleeps, they would be unaffected and retain the information, and that could be passed on through time. So one way or another, this is a line of thinking that explains Blackbeard's absurd amount of knowledge. Maybe from his origins, the Void Sentry isn't actually voided history, or at least it's not completely voided for him, possibly as we know memories are passed in lineage factors to some extent. But overall, the thematic of not sleeping would fit in well here. But we also separately got the lore about Winter Islands. The people from Winter Islands don't sleep, which if you watch my Void Sentry video, or rather the White Sky Sentry theory, then it all connects. Creating an ice age by blocking the sky with clouds would deny you the moon as well as the sun. And if the moon served such an important role, then this could all make sense. The moon, by the way, also has components that the story still has to explain. It seems like there's a regenerating power source in Burka, the ancient city underground on the moon, and a legion of winged automata powered by it, which seems to be the solution to Vegapunk's conundrum regarding the Iron Giant, searching for the power source capable of powering that and probably many more, which already narratively ties this to Vegapunk's creations and the conversation we're having around punk records. But to consolidate what we spoke about, I think that at a minimum, there existed a giant brain that people may have connected to in the past, which allowed them to become super advanced, but not without its own downfalls. There are so many flaws and errors with this idea. On one hand, without any oversight, you could have several data points inserted into the Unimind that corrupts the entire storage. Like if you had an evil conqueror brain like Doflamingo in the mix, couldn't that be strong enough to corrupt the entire memory bank? Maybe the saturation of thoughts would overwhelm the dark thoughts, but that's what I said at the start. We all have our own dark side, and within a Unimind system, there is no hiding that dark side. But at the same time, if you oversee a giant mechanism like this, then that gives someone or a group absolute power, and absolute power corrupts regardless. That's where deleting a light or contributor to the brain could be a responsibility given to someone, and those people would have absolute power, and is the line of thinking that would lead to a Void Sentry, where with the purpose of protecting the whole memory bank, they made a decision that sent the world into an 800-year cycle because they needed to delete 100 years of it. But let me back up this conversation real quick to add some more ideas. See, something I talked about lightly in a few videos in the past, but mainly on streams, and while this is a great place to insert this thought, I'll make a separate video elaborating on this, But briefly, it always confused me about how at Laugh Tale, Roger's pirate crew all received the entire Void Century history within what seemed to be like a short time. I mean, could you imagine learning all of Vegapunk's knowledge in a single sitting? Sounds impossible, right? But what about at Laugh Tale? That's 100 years instantly downloaded, it seems. And yeah, Roger has voice of all things, but what about the rest of his crew? Did he learn it himself and then tell his crew? That doesn't make sense either. Even if you had Odin reading poneglyphs, how could he possibly read the entire Void Century and learn the truth of the world like that? So ever since we got the Odin flashback, I've always thought that there had to be a brain download of some sort, which is why I talked about it in my Mind Wrote video. So what if it's that at Laugh Tale you are able to access the Void Century brain that we talked about? And I think I have an idea of how they're able to do it, which is what I'll say for a later time, but overall saying that the true treasure that Roger talked about was simply the memories of humanity, which is a great treasure. Exactly what Roger said that the world government seemed to be afraid of at Laugh Tale, and they seem to be afraid of history. So the treasure being the experiences of every human prior to us, I would say that's an insanely valuable treasure. You could probably rule the entire world just off that, and hold that thought. But going back to Roger, it could even be that Roger said he wouldn't die despite dying in the story. It's because he uploaded his memories to the records. So in that regard, him and his experiences are immortalized. So when he said he left all his treasures in one piece, it was his memories he was talking about that are living on with the One Piece itself. But speaking about treasures, let's talk more about this literal gold mine of ideas I started having. Like, let's talk about the previous gods, not the celestial dragons, but the Lunarians. It could be that the Lunarians were meant to guard the moon, which is why they're called Lunarians. But they were on the red line, which supports the idea that it was there and not the moon. So truthfully, I'm still thinking about this, but here's a few details that sent me literally to the moon when I thought of them. See, besides the Lunarians, we actually have an entire group of people that seemingly revered the moon at one point, and that is the prominent clans of Wano. See, besides Kurozumi, all the clans have moon in their name for some reason. It's a little interesting because Wano represents the land of the rising sun, Japan, yet their names are moon names. So we have the Amatsuki, the heaven moon, Kozuki, light moon, Shimotsuki, frost moon, Fugetsu, wind moon, and Uzuki, rain moon. So they have to have some connection to the moon. Maybe they protect something that can lead us to what their true purpose was. Oh wait, they were protecting the land. Let's look at Wano again real quick. Oh wait, what's that? Yeah, remember that Wano's land actually looks like a brain with a brain stem. Was that the clue the whole time? The moon clans were living on a brain-shaped land, further tying the idea that the moon and the brain are connected? Talking about it like this, it could even be that Wano itself is the One Piece records that we're talking about. And I did have some ADHD thoughts that tied this to Pluton, but let's focus back up to possibly one of my favorite connections here. Finally, let's talk about the Minks, but more importantly, the Sulong. How do their powers work? I feel like I don't even have to speak right now, and all of you will understand the gravity of what I'm saying. But I'll explain it regardless. As explained by Jinbei, the Minks stare into a full moon and access the memories of their feral ancestors, which allows them to access the full potential of their powers. Let me reiterate that real quick. Yes, in the story, we have a group of people that access memories by looking at the moon, which we're saying is a giant database. Is that not a direct indicator of exactly what we're talking about in this video? So I want to clarify, this video was made literally at the speed of Team Rocket blasting off again. And so I couldn't include all the details or talk about everything that the chapter made me think of. But if you want to see some of the other thoughts that came to mind and connections being made, check out the VOD for the live reaction posted on my channel. But there's still more connections I want to share or at least think about, and if you have any counterpoints, please comment them down below. I'd love to see them so I can make this theory even stronger. But also, if you're enjoying this video and having a great time, make sure to let me know by commenting, subscribing, and liking the video. Something else I was thinking about amongst all of this was the importance of the dawn. Was the dawn important because it was needed to wake people up from the synchronization sleep? Oh, wow, if you watched Film Red, I didn't even realize how well this theory lines up with that. Which, by the way, if you're wondering if I'll make a film red video, I am. There are 2 on the way, and I appreciate all the support you all give me in helping make these videos. But back to the dawn. It could be that the sun god was revered to an extra degree because of the freedom it gave from the synchronized dream essentially brought out by the moon. Maybe that's what Blackbeard meant when he said, "People's dreams don't ever end." Maybe that was foreshadow. Is it that Blackbeard is aware of this kind of technology and plans on implementing this at the end of the story? Maybe by the same token, that's where something like Uranus could also save the planet by blocking the moon, if that's the actual function of it. Or another interesting connection is the fact that Annie's lobby is never night, or in other words, immune to the moonlight. And something that was really interesting to me that Dax Sake shared with me after hearing all of these ideas was that with this explanation, the moon would still possibly be operational in this form. And I added maybe Enel revived the moon brain. But more so than that, if the moon were still circling the planet and collecting memories, then that might be how Emu exerts control over the world. They can essentially tap into the dreams and memories of the citizens in the entire planet and apply pressure wherever needed. And so that's why a character like Blackbeard never sleeps, so they can remain under the radar from the big brother-like entity that would be Eam here. I feel like the more you think about this idea, the more it grows, kind of like Vegapunk's brain. And hopefully all of your brains are going to grow by connecting to the ParVision records. And so with that, let me know if you guys have any more connections to add to this idea in the comments below. And let me know if you like the Redline or Wano brain idea more. Oda really has me dancing around with all of these recent chapters, and I love it. But more than anything, I love sharing these ideas with all of you. And so, like always, thank you for connecting with me, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you all on the next ParVision.